Okay, folks, Mike Partika here, and we are going to talk about the one thing EVS hates about Isom #1. That's right, we're talking about Ethan Van Sciver here, and his property, of course, is Cyberfrog. He is on his third Cyberfrog campaign, Red Extermination. Make sure you go visit Indiegogo to check out that campaign. I think his Dark Harvest campaign is still up as well, so make sure you take a look at both of those Cyberfrog campaigns. And he is, of course, talking about Eric July's property, Isom, specifically Isom #1, and very much specifically about one particular scene in Isom #1 that he's actually broken cheerleader mode on to talk about. See, Ethan Van Sciver is very usually much a cheerleader of independent comics, and if you get on his show, he'll trumpet your comics. He thinks Isom #2 is going to make over $4 million. And but the thing is there is actually something about Isom #1 that bugs him, and he has spoken out about it on his channel. I'm just kind of surprised because normally he's like all things cheerleader, but at this point he allowed himself to be a little bit critical of Isom #1. Now, what was that scene? Well, it had to do something with what I call the meet cute of Isom #1. A meet cute being usually where a boy meets girl in a particular way that eventually leads to something. Well, there's a kind of meet cute that happens in Isom #1 between Isom and the secondary character Yaira, who will be getting her own book written by the Soska sisters in winter of this year. And Isom and Yaira meet up in a very interesting way. After getting beaten up by Santuan, his nemesis, who is protecting him from his super nemesis, Darren, Santuan tosses Isom into the air, and he goes flying. Now, around the same time, we know that Yaira is about to have her ass handed to her by Alpha Core. So she is sent flying. And when the two of them are sent flying, they actually collide in midair. And hence we have our meet cute, although it's not very cute, I have to admit. And it doesn't turn out very well for Isom either. But in any case, this is kind of perplexing from a coincidence standpoint. You see, they're not really in the same part of town when their particular brouhahas happen that send them flying in the air. Now, I'm just thinking in terms of, the city of Dallas, and even if we weren't talking about the entire city of Dallas, the fictional city in Isom #1 being Florist Park, of course, but if we were just talking about like the downtown portion of Florist Park, then if you equated that with downtown Dallas, it would be as if Yaira was doing her fight in West End, and Isom was doing his fight in Deep Ellum. Now, if you're going to get randomly tossed in a particular direction, the odds are is you're not going to get tossed in any particular direction relative to each other, because these are two separate fights going on. Why on earth would you be tossing people to the point where they would collide in midair? You'd have to toss them in that exact direction to have them collide like that. And moreover, it's not just a matter of, making sure the person tosses you in the right direction. They also have to toss you in precisely the right height, altitude, and left to right kind of direction. For example, let's say that you're flying through the air and you see this other guy flying through the air. Well, if this guy is like 3 to 4 feet in either direction of you, you're just going to fly right past the person. And likewise, if he's like, 5 or 6 feet up or down, he's going to fly right past you. And you're never going to collide in midair. It takes an amazing amount of coordination to try and make some sort of midair collision to get Avery and Yaira to collide like this. And that's enough to make Ethan Van Sciver say, "Stop, I call bullshit." So, now the thing that I want to point out here, though, is that there's another author, well-known author of comic books, who has involved some of his characters in amazing coincidences. In fact, one of the most famous coincidences in all of comic books. And I'm talking about author Stan Lee and the amazing coincidence that he put into the origin of Spider-Man in Amazing Fantasy 15. Now, Amazing Fantasy 15 has the tale of Peter Parker, who, of course, acquires his powers from a radioactive spider and then becomes a television star. And while he is coming out of the studio from having performed on TV, he encounters a burglar being chased by a cop. Now, instead of stopping the burglar, he lets the burglar go because, hey, the world's. I don't care about that kind of stuff. That's the cop's job. I'm not a cop, and my life is all about me, etc., etc. Now, in an amazing coincidence, he goes home one night later in the week or the month and finds out that his uncle Ben has been murdered. And then he finds out to his horror that the person who shot Uncle Ben dead is the same burglar that he let go when he was at the television studio. So he could have stopped this guy. He didn't, and now because he didn't, his uncle is dead. And making sure nobody else's uncle or loved ones die, that is one of the driving forces behind what Spider-Man does. Now, question though. You've got a burglar who's robbing a Midtown Manhattan TV station. Why would a guy burglarizing a high-rise building in Midtown Manhattan then bother with robbing a little old house in Queens? Yeah, because burglars kind of specialize. Crime has its own specialties. You don't just have people robbing just any old things. If you have a burglar whose specialty is high-rise buildings in Midtown, you are generally not going to see that guy going to a house in Queens. It's just not going to happen, even though Queens and Manhattan are not that far from each other, and even though we're talking about a difference of several nights. But the fact that he's robbing two entirely different locations, it just seems to be fit together for the sake of the story rather than out of any real reason. And this has been noticed by no fewer than two future writers of Spider-Man. First, Marv Wolfman felt that he had to take it upon himself to explain why the burglar robbed Aunt May and Uncle Ben's house. And his explanation was that the burglar, in his youth, was in jail with a gangster named Dutch Malone, who had accumulated millions of dollars and who had stashed those millions of dollars in the house that Peter Parker formerly lived in with his Aunt May and Uncle Ben. And so when he robbed their house and shot Uncle Ben, he was looking for that particular treasure. So that basically gave this burglar a reason to go after that particular house. It wasn't just a random thing. Now, writer John Byrne, in his retelling of Spider-Man's origin year, Spider-Man Chapter 1, he had his own explanation. He had the burglar be someone who was helping Uncle Ben carry out a computer that he was buying for his nephew Peter. And this burglar, who was claiming he had gone straight, anyway, he made note of where Uncle Ben was going, or what the address label or something on it was, and he was able to follow Uncle Ben home to the point where he started casing their house. He figures, well, if they've got the money to buy a computer, well, then they've probably got some additional money on hand. And that's when he sees Peter Parker as Spider-Man coming out of the house, and he gets it into his head that Spider-Man is a burglar like him. He thinks that Spider-Man is actually robbing the Parker house himself. So once he encounters Spider-Man again, which is kind of a randomish thing to begin with here, in the studios. So he goes to the studios where Spider-Man is performing, and he figures that, well, maybe he can, I don't know, it doesn't say it here, but maybe this guy went to Spider-Man's TV studio thinking that he could cut some sort of deal with Spider-Man, and instead he winds up rifling through people's stuff in the dressing rooms, and then he's being chased by a cop out past Spider-Man, and Spider-Man lets him go, yada yada. And then Peter Parker goes home that same night and finds out that his uncle has been murdered because the burglar, thinking that he could find Spider-Man at that house, went to the house and surprised Uncle Ben and shot him. So then he actually offers Spider-Man, to be partners with the guy. Like, we could be a couple of, serious cat burglars or something. So, anyway, it seems like John Byrne actually introduced a lot more coincidences than he actually resolved in this case. But in any case, all I'm really trying to say with all this is that Isom is walking in the steps of not just Batman, in the sense that Batman's origin was not revealed until several issues past his first appearance, and that has been a major complaint of people who have been reading Isom that, well, his origin's not in the book. It's like, well, if you read Batman for the first few issues, you wouldn't have gotten Batman's origin either. So he's in good company. Well, in the same way, Isom is in good company with Spider-Man, because Spider-Man's origin is based in a very, very unreal sort of coincidence, and Isom too has had this massive coincidence happen to him. To the point where maybe in the future somebody will have to do a Isom Chapter 1 and see if maybe he can retcon a reason why Isom and Yaira collided. Maybe there was some supernatural forces that caused Isom to be thrown in the same direction as Yaira and for them to have collided in midair. That's right. Maybe we'll find out it was Documon all along. I'm Mike Partika. Thank you for watching this video on the one thing EVS hated about Isom #1. I don't think it's really such a big deal. I think we've encountered coincidences like that before, and honestly, I actually enjoyed that aspect of Isom #1. The fact that he collided with Yaira in that way, and then was thrown into a taxi right in front of Alpha Core. I thought the momentum of the book was really picking up at that point and was really demonstrating to us why Avery hated going to the city so much. It's like you go to the city and all of a sudden, not only do you encounter trouble in the thing that you're there for, all of a sudden you get drawn into all of this other trouble that has nothing to do with you, but you get swept up in it anyway. And it seemed like that was really the momentum of where the book was going, and I would have liked to have seen that momentum carry through, but at that point was when Eric July decided it was time to stop using Isom as much of a springboard as it was for the other characters and get back to just the central story of Avery and Darren. And, we may come back and look at that and say, yeah, that was a wise choice. So, anyway, I wanted to go over that, and I think I have sufficiently done so, so I will be leaving you now. Thank you for watching. Please join me on Gab, where I have my social media hangout, and also check out my videos. They're available on YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble, and I will talk to you later. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. Bye.